Good morning. This is going to be a little bit of a longer lesson on Judaism, which is the first of our three religions. This will be video one of two about Judaism. And this first video will talk about the history and the origins of the religion of Judaism. Second video will talk about the beliefs and practices of people who practice Judaism today. So let's get started. This week is a PowerPoint, so it's a little bit different format. I'm going to try and upload these slides to Google Classroom as well, but if for some reason they don't quite work, you'll need to make sure that you watch this video to fill your notes out. So let's get going with Judaism. So where is Judaism from? So Judaism originates in what we call Mesopotamia in the Middle East. So Mesopotamia is this orange section in what is now modern-day Iraq. And back then there was a city called Ur that is right near the border of where Iraq and Kuwait today. And the founder of Judaism, according to their holy book, the Torah, was this man named Abraham. And according to the story, Abraham lived in the city of Ur with his family, and God called Abraham and commanded him to move with his people from Ur all the way to the land of what we call Canaan. That would be modern-day Israel, the country of Israel today. All the information we have about Abraham comes from the Torah, which, as we saw yesterday, is the holy book for the Jewish people. For this reason, we consider him to be a legendary figure in history. We don't know if he actually was real or not. That might sound weird to you, but this is very similar to like the heroes in Greek mythology, like Achilles or Odysseus. We don't know if those people were actually real. There are all these stories about them. A lot of them involve very fantastical things. Like, for example, in the Torah, Abraham has a baby when his wife is 90 years old, right? That's not possible today. And so there are all these kind of legendary stories, so we can't prove that he was real outside of the Torah, but we can't disprove it either. So on our little timeline of Jewish history, we're going to put Abraham with a question mark, and if he was a real person, he would have lived around 1800 BCE, or before Common Era. And so he is the legendary founder of Judaism in Mesopotamia. And remember, this is a monotheistic religion, or a belief in one God. Unlike the other people in the area, who all worship many gods, Abraham and his family worshiped one God, and they called this God Yahweh, and that was their name. In their eyes, he had the power over everybody in the world, not just Abraham and his family, but the entire world. This is also a new idea. Most people in the ancient Middle East believed their gods were just specific for their town and did not have power outside their town. So believing that your God is the most powerful God in the entire world, that's a new thing. According to the Torah, Yahweh would look after Abraham and the Hebrews, not because of sacrifices and ceremonies, but because of a promise, because Abraham had promised to obey God. In return, Yahweh would promise to protect Abraham and his descendants. Descendants is like your children and grandchildren and so on. This promise between them is called a covenant, or an agreement between Abraham and God. And this is very important for Judaism. And the deal here is that Abraham would move from Ur to Canaan, and the other part is that God would protect Abraham and his people. So Judaism is founded by Abraham. Again, a legendary figure. We don't know if he was real or not, but that's what we got there.
The Hebrew Bible is full of stories of Israel's origins. The first is Abraham, who leaves Mesopotamia with his family and journeys to the Promised Land, Canaan.
The Lord said to Abraham, "Go forth from your native land and from your father's house to the land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great. Genesis 12, 1 and 2.
According to the Bible, this promise establishes the covenant, a sacred contract between God and Abraham. To mark the covenant, Abraham and all males are circumcised. His descendants will be God's chosen people. They will be fruitful, multiply, and inhabit all the land between Egypt and Mesopotamia. In return, Abraham and his people, who will become the Israelites, must worship a single God. But in ancient times, all people, from the Egyptians to the Greeks to the Babylonians, worship many gods, usually in the form of idols.
This is a new idea. It was an idea that nobody had ever had before. God, in our sense, doesn't exist before Abraham.
It is hard to appreciate today how radical an idea this must have been in a world dominated by polytheism, the worship of many gods and idols. The Abraham narrative is part of the first book of the Bible, Genesis, along with Noah and the flood and Adam and Eve. This belief will become the foundation of two other great monotheistic religions, Christianity and Islam.
Okay, so hopefully that video gave you a little review of what we talked about yesterday, where Abraham is the founder of both, not both, but is Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And he is also credited with the first monotheistic religion. So, moving on to our next slide, the Judaism's holy book is called the Torah, and this is where we get the story of Abraham and also of our next prophet, Moses. It is a Jewish holy book. It includes religious, moral, and social laws that guide the lives of Jews. These books are also included in the Christian Bible. They are the first 5 books of the Christian Bible, which is Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. In this story, God creates the universe out of nothing. Traditionally, the Torah is read on a scroll that can be seen in this picture here.
All pay heed. The Lord Jehovah, has given unto you these 10 commandments for all to obey.
All right, so that was a little bit of a funny video. But that brings us to our next point of the second great prophet in Judaism after Abraham is this guy named Moses. Okay, again, Moses is what we call a legendary figure as well. We don't have a lot of historical records of Moses, but if he lived, he would have lived around 1300 BCE, so about 500 years after Abraham. And here's where we get into a little bit of a story time, okay? So Abraham and his people are living in Canaan according to the Torah, and then there's a famine. So it's a drought, and the land is really bad, and so they move to Egypt by the Nile River, which had good farmland, and they lived there for about 400 years. Unfortunately, according to the Bible, the Egyptians decide to make them slaves. And this is disputed by historians. Some historians do not believe that the Jews were ever enslaved by the Egyptians because Egyptians traditionally did not have a lot of slave labor. However, in the Bible, it describes the Jewish people as being slaves there and it being really cruel. So again, there's a little bit of a dispute as to whether or not this took place. Doesn't mean it's not true, just means we have to be a little skeptical. Anyway, according to the story in the Bible, the Egyptians flee Egypt sometime around 1300 BCE. The Jews call this event the Exodus, or the exit, or the escape. And they remember it every year using a special religious festival called the Passover. According to the Torah, the man who led the Hebrews out of slavery is called Moses. You probably have heard the story of how he, according to this, parted the Red Sea and they walked across on dry land at the bottom. A very famous story. According to it, his story, his mother hid him in the basket along the banks of the river. He was found by an Egyptian princess and raised in the Egyptian king's house to be an Egyptian, but then he realized his true nature and then went back to save his people, parted the Red Sea, and they escaped Egypt into Canaan again. And while they are going back to their homeland, Moses climbed the top of a mountain to pray to God. And according to the Torah, God gives him these 10 commandments or laws for the Jews that God writes onto stone with his finger. And these are the 10 laws of Judaism. They are also in the Bible, and you probably have heard of them as called the 10 Commandments before. The Hebrews believe that these 10 Commandments formed what we call a new covenant or a new deal between God and his people. The old covenant with Abraham was that the Jews would follow God, and now with the Moses covenant, we actually have legit laws to follow. And these are super important documents. Oh, let's go back. There we go. Super important document. So pause right here and look at the 10 Commandments. There are 2 questions about them in your notes, and answer these questions about the 10 Commandments. If you don't know some of these words, you can look them up on Google and find a little bit of a translation for some of these words. But read this primary source and answer those 2 document-based questions in your notes. Okay, after Moses dies, the Jewish people make it back to their homeland of Canaan or Israel, and they form a kingdom of Israel. And they have 3 main kings, a guy named Saul, a guy named David, and a guy named Solomon. David is the most famous and most powerful king in Israel's history. He unites all of these tribes into one great nation, and he's the guy in the story that kills the giant Goliath. David's son is named Solomon. He was a very rich and wise king, according to the legends, and he built the great temple to God in the city of Jerusalem. And this becomes the center of the religion of Judaism, and it's still an important location today. The city of Jerusalem becomes the holy city of Judaism because that's where the temple is. Unfortunately for the Jews, they don't get to live in Jerusalem peacefully forever. About 500 years after Solomon builds the temple, a neighboring group of people called the Babylonians invade and destroy the temple, as seen in this painting here. And they take the Jewish people as slaves back to Babylon. However, slavery does not happen forever there, and 50 years later, the Jews return from their slavery and back to their homeland. They build a second temple. And that happens around 500 BCE. They build their second temple.
About 2 centuries pass after the Merneptah Stela places the Israelites in Canaan. Families grow into tribes. Their population increases. Then, about 1000 BC, one of the Bible's larger-than-life figures emerges to unite the 12 tribes of Israel against a powerful new enemy.
David put his hand into the bag. He took out a stone and slung it. It struck the Philistine in the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell down on the ground. 1 Samuel 17:49.
The Bible celebrates David as a shepherd boy who vanquishes the giant Goliath. Of all the names in the Hebrew Bible, none appears more than David. Scriptures say David creates a kingdom that stretches from Egypt to Mesopotamia. He makes Jerusalem his royal capital. And in a new covenant, Yahweh promises that he and his descendants will rule forever.
Okay, we'll stop the video